Hello and welcome back to Tiny Artist TV. So today is going to be the next video in my Consider the Basics series where I break down basic elements from art and show you guys how to utilize them at pretty much any level. So for today's video we're going to be considering the body, which is going to be the full pose, but I'm not just going to jump into full poses. We're going to start with what we've already done in the first few videos, looking at what's considered a bust portrait, which is the head and shoulders, and then we're going to be looking at half body and then full body, and I'll be showing you guys how to break down static and dynamic poses, and even showing you how to go from a reference to a full piece of art. So let's go ahead and get started. First, we'll look at breaking down the pose from bust portrait, half body, and then full body. So I'm just going to go to Google and type in bust portrait. Oh, look at that. It's already in there. And you can see here that the emphasis again is on the head and shoulders. So I'm just going to pick a random one and show you guys the relation between the head and neck and shoulder proportions. Let's do old Caesar here. He's a fancy guy. We're just gonna pop him right in. Oh my goodness. Alright, well, let's resize this first. Like, a lot. Look at that. Crazy. Had to go all the way out here. Ugh. Okay. Now we're working with something. We're gonna zoom back in, and then I'm gonna step over to the tablet and break this down for you. So what we're looking at here, didn't want to move it, we're gonna draw on it. There we go. Is this first section here. The second section would be considered half body. And of course, the full figure is the full body. Lovely. So, with the bust, we have already looked at faces and how to break down the facial shapes. And I did sort of mention where the neck sits in relation to, like, it connects to the back of the ears with a muscle called the sternocleidomastoid. Now, even though a neck typically presents itself as a box underneath of the head, because of the formation of the muscle, it's actually better to look at it as a triangle when looking at it in relation to the shoulders as well. Because your shoulders are going to sit on this line and the muscle is going to sit here and connect down from the neck and into your shoulders here. So you don't necessarily need to break down the face because again I spent 2 videos doing that, so you can go back and watch those. So this is going to be your shoulder line, and the top of your shoulders sits right across the top of where your chest, the middle of your chest would be. And then your shoulders come out here and here. So if I was going to draw this away from my reference, I have my head here. And then here is where my neck starts. So I'm gonna go down and out a little bit. And now you can see with a thinner character, the neck is gonna be thinner because there's not as much muscle there. The more muscular your character is, the more dramatic this triangle is gonna be. And that's why the neck also looks shorter on beefy characters, because your neck is still here where your bronchial tubes and all that good stuff, it's still a straight line in here, but this muscle has been built out into a triangle shape into the shoulders, versus if you have a more average character, it's going to be a little less noticeable. And again, just like on old Caesar here, may even present itself more as a straight line. And here's your neck. But you can see here where it tapers down into the shoulders in that triangle shape. I think a really good example of the neck to shoulder triangle is Anne Hathaway, because she has a very distinct slender triangle thing going on with her neck and shoulders. So like, now that I've mentioned it, you probably won't be able to unsee it, but there's plenty of, if you look at different faces, some of the shoulders sit very squat and wide, but on some people it's very slender and graceful, and that's a good way to give your character some personality without necessarily having to do anything to their face. So let's say if again I trade this in, instead of it being this square, more masculine type structure, it's very angular, very hard. If I get rid of that line there and soften this up a bit, now you can see it looks a little more graceful, a little more doe-like. And of course the neck probably wouldn't be that long. Like some people do have very long necks, but on average the longer neck is more typical of an elfin or an alien type character. So you can still have it be slender without it being too crazy. And the other thing that helps is the slender face, because if I erase this and make the jaw more angular, now something about this is kind of in the uncanny valley. This is where you get your, I guess, pretty boy archetype with the square jaw, a little more narrow of a chin, and the long slender neck, a la Webtoons. Just add abs and there you go, you've got a main character. So that's Bust Portrait. And just a quick breakdown, because I know that was a lot going on there. Head. Neck starts at the bottom, behind the ears. So if we're drawing this in profile, neck is going to come right out of here, right behind the ear. Probably the easiest out of the three, because again it's just head and shoulders. Half body. So now we've got to consider from the head to the waistline. So with half body, again, you've got your head, neck, shoulders, shoulder line, but now where do we go for the body? So the body, of course, you may or may not have seen like different body charts, like, oh, you're a triangle or a circle or apple or pear or whatever. It's, again, a good place to reference. Doesn't necessarily teach you proportions the best it can. So again, looking at actual human bodies and figuring out how the proportions work for the body you want to draw is the best way to go. For me, I want this character to be kind of slim and masculine, like the example that we have over here. So I'm going to keep it slim here. Another way that can definitely help you with just drawing people in general is, if you can, take an anatomy course, because that way you can actually keep in the back of your mind skeletal structure, muscular structure, and how everything connects together, and it will make your forms more organic and more believable. Even if you're doing a stylistic caricature, stylistic portrait, the proportions will still make sense. So, chest is here. The chest is usually about, well, the half body is usually about 2 heads long. So let's say your neck is a half a head. You've got 2 more heads before you get to the hip line. And for a slender character, it's going to taper in. And this is where you're going to see your oblique muscles, rib cage, waistline. You can start at the top of the pants here. Some wild, crazy prince hair. I don't know. Anyway, shoulders here. So the middle of your arm falls about where your waistline is, and the tips of your fingers usually fall about mid-thigh. So if you're gonna do a short half body usually stops right at the top of the hips. A longer half body can start or end at the top of just above the kneecap. So when you're drawing the body, it goes in a little bit, even if it's a wider character. Music. Alright, let's say this guy, it's a big, beefy, like heavyweight, like lifter or something of that sort. And you can already see I've made the neck a little bit wider because he probably has more muscle up there. Your hip line is still going to point inward because that's where your bones are. Everybody's got bones. Doesn't matter how fat, how skinny you are. Everybody's bones are in the same place. Unless for some reason you're missing like rib bones or what have you. But you get the point. Still going to point in. Hips are still going to start here. Pelvis is still going to be here. Legs are still going to start here, even if he's got big old chunky quads. It's still going to be in this box here. And now I've drawn Baymax. Awesome. So, with the half body, again, the fingertips are going to touch just at the top of the thigh bone here. So, in relation, here's our bust line. Hips are going to be about 2 heads down. And this isn't a hard and fast rule with me thinking in mind of if your character is tall and skinny, but usually if your character is tall and skinny, their face is also a little tall and skinny. So it may still be about 2 heads tall or long as far as the torso is concerned. Your elbow line is going to fall where the waist is. And usually the arm proportionally is 2 rectangles, give or take, with your forearm tapering more of a wide triangle shape. Like a very tall, almost a rectangle, but then it tapers down to where the wrist is to a smaller point than where you started. So then for full body, I'll leave that on here for just a second. take a screen cap of it. I think it's been up for long enough though. We're going to look at everything. So, starting from scratch again. Got your head, neck, usually about half a head, unless you're doing like a model character where it may be a little longer, or a muscular character where it may be a little wider. Again, I'm doing average characters because most people starting out draw average characters, and then as they get more comfortable drawing bodies in general, may branch out to draw wider or more muscular or chubbier or more willowy, just different body styles. So for this body type, I'm doing an average male. Male because I did a lot of female body types in the other examples. So we're giving the guys some time to shine. Neck and shoulders, shoulder line, and something else about the shoulders, and this is something that you'll probably find in a lot of how to draw humans books, is they'll tell you that the shoulders should be wide enough to fit 2 more heads. On average, yes. But again, if you're, drawing a more slender character, the shoulders may be more slender, may not necessarily fit another 2 heads. But usually, because of where the clavicle is, which is this bone here, it's a pretty wide bone. So the shoulders, on average, are going to be about the size or the width of 2 more heads. So your body is going to be 2 heads across and 2 heads down. So 1, 2, 1, 2. Your shoulders are going to be here. Hips going in. Pelvis at the bottom of this triangle. Of course, if this is a female presenting character, it's going to go out a little bit wider. Clothing choice is also going to play into that. And then for legs, your leg is going to be about the length of your torso. So again, about the size of 2 heads. And then your calf muscles, or the bottom of your leg, it's going to be about 1.5 heads. And then you got your feet. Waistline here. So elbow's going to fall here. Mid-thigh here. Triangle for the forearms. Hands here. Fingertips here. I gave him some really wide legs. Maybe he's a runner. So there you go. As far as breaking down the full body to get you started and where the shape relationships work. So if we were going to do this pose that I've got over here, how would this look? You have your head here. Shoulder line is actually going to be tilted, but the neck still makes this triangle shape here. Now, it's not literally a triangle. You can see where his neck ends here, but let me zoom in a little bit. Head here. So the neck is here, but you can see where it's making the triangle with the shoulder line. Also, sorry if it's kind of hard to hear me now. The fan just turned on. Waistline here, and you can see where the elbow falls in line. Even though you can't see the other arm, you can imagine it stopping right here. This head, 1, 2. Hips, triangular forearm. Rib cage, going up and around. Scroll down a little. Alright, and the hands right here in the pocket at the top of the thigh. And then you can see here the oblique pointing down to the pelvis. We've got two head leg, calf muscle, foot. And now if I take this layer off, you can see the general shape of the body. And look at that. It's just that simple. And of course, again, like most things, it gets easier with practice. But this helps you understand the relationship between the different forms of the body. And if you can break it down to shapes, you can build it back up any way you want. You can make him wider in the shoulders, you can make him taller, you can make his face more narrow, whatever. Moving on to the next part of the video. We're going to look at some more accessible methods of breaking down poses for your own personal drawings, and that is to say with pen and paper. So I've got these pages that I've just taken out of some magazines that I've got lying around, and I've got a few different poses here, and I'm just going to show you 3 different ways that I personally like to break down references when I'm not using my tablet. So the first method is to draw directly onto the paper. Now, if this is a picture of family or something, you may not necessarily want to do that, but for this one, I'm just going to take a marker and draw directly onto the magazine page. Doing this method, it's sort of tracing, but I'm not obviously going to be able to draw over this. So what it's doing is giving me the ability to feel where the shapes go into relation with each other, and as you can see, I've drawn some arms off to the side just after tracing the shapes from the magazine itself. And knowing where the proportions go, as you can see, I've drawn out the legs here. Overall, this gives me a better sense of where things need to go on my character when I want to draw it onto my actual paper. So now we're going to do just that. I'm going to look at the shapes that I've broken down, and I'm going to just start with the head and work my way down the rest of the body and draw this particular character. And the final steps just involve cleaning up any unnecessary lines, so I'm just going to take my eraser and get rid of the lines where the dress is. And just add in a few facial features just so that it's not a collection of lines and shapes here. Method 2, once again, does involve some tracing, but instead of doing the magazine style where you take the marker and draw directly over it, I'm going to take a sheet of tracing paper and draw over my reference. Again, just breaking things down into basic shapes with, instead of a marker, using a pencil. Starting with the head, and again, just working my way down like we did before. And now you have a pose that you can draw directly over for practice, or you can do like we did in the first method. And now that you've broken it down into shapes, you can freeform it to transform the body into whatever shape you need it to be, while keeping the proportions and angles of the pose. Method number 3, which method number 1, we've got our tracing paper method. Method number 2, we've got the marker method. So for method number 3, we're going to do a true freeform. We're going to get rid of all this stuff. I'm going to grab my last reference. And I'm just going to look at the character and figure out where the shapes are and draw it as I see it. So this is a more, I don't want to say advanced technique, because A, I don't want to sound snobby, B, I don't want to scare anyone who's just getting into art and thinking that they can't do this, because you can absolutely do this. Again, it just takes practice. It's understanding forms. So what I'm doing here is I'm looking at where things begin and end. I understand facial structure now. I know where the neck should be. I know where the shoulders need to line up, and I can just draw based on what's here on the picture and translate that onto my paper without any extra guides. And that's how you translate from what you see in the magazine onto the paper. Again, I know I made it look easy, but it's just understanding fundamentals and then applying them after practicing. I know you guys are probably tired of hearing me say this, but practice is your friend. And now we're moving into the last part of the video, which is studying static poses versus dynamic poses. So we're going to go back to the tablet for this one just because it'll be easier to show you. So here we go. Okay, so now we're going to look at how to take pretty much this reference here and again turn it into a full piece of artwork like I showed in the beginning, like I've basically been using for my backgrounds. Those are the same two images that have been in the past couple of videos. So I'm going to start with the sketch. We can start with the method that I used a little bit earlier and focus on the shapes that are in the body, but I'm just going to go ahead and do method 3, which is to just look at the reference and draw what I see, because that's what I'm used to, that's what I've been doing for a while at this point. So I'm just going to go ahead. We've got the head here. You see the shoulders are very raised. It is a dynamic static pose. So what makes a pose static versus dynamic is triangles versus squares, basically. So this pose, you can see it's very triangular. She's got a very wide stance. It would help if I move the layer to where you can see what I'm doing. Okay. You can see the wide stance, whereas a static pose, it would be more like just standing straight on, just kind of Joe Schmo, hands on the hips, what have you. This, and we can even again translate that shape to make sure that our stance is as wide as it is in the reference here. So she's got her arm going out here, shoulder, and it's not going to be exact. Like, this is again just a starting point for my personal character art. This kind of relaxed. Chest is up a bit. This is a very like proud stance. Got the legs going out. And the shoes pointing forward. Now, my character doesn't wear shoes per se, but this still helps with seeing where we want our toes to go. Let's say if the character is like standing on the balls of their feet, this is pretty much the same pose that they would be doing. Got the back of the foot here. And then our hips. So the body comes down here. The hip starts here. The pelvis is going to be here. And so our leg is going to be here. Calf. This stance is actually a lot wider than what she's doing. This is a very domineering stylistic choice. Got a rib cage coming down here, so the waist would actually be right here. She's gonna have a little bit of a hip dip there. Abs going this way, obliques. I'm actually going to have her looking down and to her left, our right. I just feel it's a little more imposing than just having her kind of looking off to the side. It's kind of like she's got us in her sights. Alright, arm up, right angle. Hands, thumb, fingers. It's actually tilted a little bit more. There we go. Palm, wrist, forearm, shoulder up. I'm going to bring that up a little bit. Now, the pole is just going to follow wherever that hand goes. Fix that a little bit. Okay. Shaking everything over here. Hairline here, ears here. Okay. So now that we've got the body blocked, you can see how I've used the reference as a guide, not necessarily a copy, which if you're starting out, again, tracing it's fine for practice, but don't trace someone else's art or don't trace someone else's reference and then try to like sell it or pawn it off as your own, because that's just dirty. Hair. Didn't consider the hair. Funny. I'm still trying to figure out how exactly I want this character's hair to look like. I know what I want her face and her body to look like, but as far as the hair goes, I kind of had this idea where she's got like this chain of puffs going on. Headband of some sort. And then Rick-Tan, where she's from, it's hot, so everybody kind of keeps their hair back and away from their face, because otherwise that would just be torture. And so now we also see the hair is following this triangular line of dynamism. Alright. I'm actually going to change this open hand to a fist. And me being able to freestyle this just comes from practicing. If you're bad at something, practice it. Eventually you'll get good at it and you'll stop hating it. Well, maybe. Alright, so now she's got this power fist. Got her hand figured out, more or less. you'll see it better in the line art, which I'm not going to draw the line art on camera because I'm, again, trying to sort of shorten these videos a little bit. So you get the idea. And then I'll just line out my details from here: clothing, hair, facial features, all that good stuff. So for now, let's just look at a couple other poses and see how to break them down. So these are, as you can see, very dynamic, very emotive. You can see this triangle of motion here. You've got your starting point, and the energy is going just kind of out. So if we were gonna do this, for this one I may actually, like if I was going to draw this, I could still freeform it, but because dynamic poses are still sort of a weakness of mine, I may trace it first from the reference and then freehand it, because at that point, again, I've already drawn it once, and so my hand kind of has some familiarity with the movement going out. So anyway, you can go here, your shoulders, and even the body itself is making somewhat of a triangle. It's pointing down in towards the legs here, and then it bows out again this way. Their leg foreshortened. This is normal. This going all the way back, and then this is foreshortened. So these two are almost the same shape. You can see that this leg here and this leg here, or this part of the leg, are the same shape in relation to where we foreshorten the forearms. And then you have your little foot back here, arm coming out, arm going back. Should be square. Yep. And palm, finger, finger, finger here, and if we take the reference off, wrong layer, now you can see where everything needs to go, and you can flesh it out accordingly. Now, if it's a stock image, there's not necessarily anything wrong with tracing. It's just that when you are able to freeform, you pretty much level up as an artist. You don't need to rely on references as much. But having the reference is going to be your best friend, I'm telling you. And I'm glad to see that there is less kickback in the art community about using references. I don't even know how this necessarily started, but some weird beef about like, oh, if you're using references, you're cheating. What do you think the Renaissance masters did? They literally stood in front of naked dudes and drew them. Like, that's a reference. It's a live reference, but you're not drawing it from memory. So, off my soapbox here. Now we're going to block out her. So with the circle, square, square method that we use to draw our faces in the first few videos, and I know this is getting really pixely. I made the canvas way too small. I apologize for that. I'm gonna make my pencil a little bit smaller too, so you can see what I'm doing. Circle, square, square, ear. Now when I take this off, you can see where the nose and mouth go in relation to the jawline. Neck, still a triangle. Shoulder line. The body is twisting into two triangles. Look at that. This crazy dynamic line here. Leg, also a triangle, where we have the hip here and the toe is pointing back up to the hip, and then this leg here just balances out the whole figure. So I'm going to erase this because it's getting kind of wild, and we're going to start over. Circle, square, jawline, triangle, shoulder line, triangle. Ah, that's a square. Well, either way. Triangle. Dynamic leg. Foot is an arrow. Pointing back up to the ankle. This line here, this is just a straight line. Whoa, hold up. The bracer's way too big. Cool, alright. Still just very gently touch it, and there we go. Alright, and even the arms. So this arm is pointing out, and the hand is a triangle. Got mid-arm, forearm, and you can already see it here. Right angle, hand pointing down. Boom. And now we take both layers off. And this one was originally, so even without the reference, you can see the energy is going down and out this way. And this leg and this arm, it's just to balance where the motion is going. This grounds the figure pretty much. So now we're gonna go back to Scopa. And I'm gonna finish drawing this one off camera because I've already shown you guys how I broke down the pose. You've seen me do line art if you've watched any of my other previous videos, and I'll go ahead and do the full art, and then the next video we're actually going to look at color picking, color theory, and how to choose your color palettes in a smart, efficient way. As usual, I want to thank my watchers who tune in on a regular basis. Thanks for tuning in, and if you're not subscribed, go ahead and subscribe so you get notifications on the next video in this series. So now that we're done posing the face, head, body, all that good stuff, we're going to look at coloring our characters, and eventually we're going to look at doing a full scene with these characters. So hope you guys stay tuned, but until then, I'll see you next time. Have a weird day.